How do you go about conducting a business valuation? Let's say that as we have in the past, my client retain you to do a business valuation, and I represent a non-business spouse, and your mission is to determine, for our purposes, the fair value of the other party's interest in that business, for purposes of either settling the case, or preparing for trial, or going to trial, at which you testify. What are the steps you go through?
The first step is to gather information. We'll prepare a comprehensive document request list and generally send it to the attorney and have them produce it to the other side. And we will look for tax returns, financial statements, generally for a period of 5 years, depending on the facts and circumstances, maybe less, and more often than not, maybe more. We'll also look to the underlying books and records to understand specific transactions that may be relevant to the valuation. There also may be some non-business expenses or non-recurring expenses that may need to be adjusted for in arriving at a normalized income or cash flow level. We'll also spend some time doing a comprehensive management interview, getting key persons in the company to sit down with us and go through the history of the company, the background of the company, the operations of the company, and also what management's vision of the future prospects of the company are. We'll also look outside the company at the prevailing economic climate and also the climate in the general industry in which the entity operates in, and we'll do our independent research to gain as much understanding as possible. And we take all of this information and consider it in our evaluation engagements.
And of course, if you need more information, then you would contact the attorney and say, obtain for me whatever I need, either by a subpoena or a notice to produce documents or something. If you're not getting the cooperation you need, there are techniques that we have that we can hopefully get those documents to you so that you can do a full and complete report. Is that correct?
Yes, and in fact, in some cases, if we're not getting cooperation with the management interview, we'll also ask the attorney to possibly depose the business owner or persons who are members of management.
So now at this point you have all this data together. What's the next step?
The next step is to analyze the data and to look at the various valuation approaches. There's the asset-based approach, there's an income approach, and a market approach. And we will consider all three approaches in performing our valuation engagement and choose the approach or approaches that are most appropriate to arrive at our valuation conclusion.
And then you encapsulize all of that in a report, is that correct?
In a written report, yes.
Okay. And that report can be used for, as we indicated, for settlement purposes, or can be used for trial purposes in the courtroom, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you've testified in court using your reports and with regard to valuation of businesses in the past, is that correct?
That's correct.
Sure. Okay. Now, in addition to doing the business evaluation aspect, there's also what I call the cash flow or income aspect. Because to me, the business valuation aspect looks backward over a course of time, and perhaps the cash does too, but in terms of determining cash flow and income, such as, for example, ability to pay alimony or child support, is that part of your investigation or analysis?
Generally, when we're engaged in a matrimonial case, the attorney will ask us to value the business and determine cash flow. And in many respects, those two analyses are very similar because in determining a value of a business, we need to understand the cash flow of that business, and the portions of that cash flow may or may not be available to the business owner for support purposes, and that's one of the aspects that we look at in determining income and cash flow available for an owner. And again, in starting that process and determining the cash flow, we'll start with the tax returns of the individuals. Now, in looking at a tax return, we can gain an understanding of the salary, earned income, which we call salary and flow-through income from a business, but also unearned income of interest and dividends and possibly capital gains. But the income as reported on the tax return doesn't necessarily reflect the cash flow available to the parties. For example, a salary on a tax return is net of any salary deferrals such as a 401k that the wage earner is deferring into a 401k plan. Generally, when we do our cash flow analysis, we'll add that back to the salary reported on an individual income tax return as being available to the parties. Another aspect deals with if you have highly paid executives who may be part of not only a 401k plan, but also a stock plan or restricted stock grants, or possibly options or other types of deferred income that wouldn't necessarily show up on the W-2 or on a tax return. To get a full picture of that individual's earnings for the year, we would request information possibly directly from the Human Resource Department in order to gain an understanding of what the real income of that person was for the year. In a circumstance where there's a family-owned business and the income reported on the tax return from that business may or may not reflect the actual cash flow available. In certain circumstances, there may be losses shown on the tax return from a business, but those losses may be generated from depreciation, the systematic expensing of a capital asset.
They're paper losses.
Yes, we call those non-cash losses. If you add those back, there may be positive cash flow, but for tax purposes, there may be a loss. So we look to what was distributed and also what was available for distribution in making our determination. Conversely, there may be significant income reported on a tax return from a business, but the business may be repaying substantial debt, may have substantial capital expenditures that are necessary. So the income is used to fund those items which are not deductible, and therefore resulting in taxable income, but yet no cash is available for distribution. And so the income may overstate a person's actual cash available when compared to what's on the tax return.